Okay. All right. Let's see. I was gonna guess it's enough lighting. I am reading the book one table of contents. If I can get there. All right. Book one: The Popes of Avion, 1305 to 1376. 1305, Clement V begins the separation from Rome. 1316, John the 22nd established a permanent abode at Avion. Evils which result from this cause, the popes dependent on the government of France, yet assiduous in promoting the spread of Christianity, disastrous effects of the Avion period, its effects upon rival parties in Italy. Then in 314, I guess, oh, okay, so they're going, whatever. So I guess they're not totally in chronological order. In 314, death of Clement V, Dante and Petrarch condemned the residents in France. Petrarch's condemnation of the Avion popes exaggerated. Effect on Avion of the great influx of strangers. Also in 314, Rome in a state of desolation and anarchy. In art, Avion became the rival of the Eternal City. Rome brought to the brink of ruin. Financial difficulties at Avion. Dante's indignation of the cupidity of the popes. Conflict between the empire and the church. Between the friar minors and John the 22nd. Subversive doctrines of Occam, Marcellano, and Jean de Gendon. Marsiglio. There you go. Subversive doctrines of Occam, Marsiglio, and Jean de Gendon. New principles of civil and ecclesiastical governments. The Pope and the Council subject to the civil power. The goods of the church, the property of the state. Exaggerated theories on behalf of the church. Marsiglio, the precursor of the revolution. Oh, that should be interesting. Deposition of the Pope and elected of an anti-Pope. Schism in the church. 1328. Deposition of the Pope and election of an anti-Pope. Schism in the church. Envenomed struggle between church and state. 1334, death of John the 22nd, election of Benedict the 12th. In 1339, I think that's erection of the papal palace at Avion. The Pope represses corruption and reforms the religious orders. 1342, his death and elevation of Clement VI. Death of Louis of Bavaria and triumph of the Pope. Revolt of Cola de Cola de Rizino and its suppression. Character of Clement VI. In 1348, he issues bulls for the protection of the Jews. Extravagance during his pontificate. Resistance to the payment of taxes levied by the Pope. Duke Stephen of Bavaria forbids their collection. In 1352, election of Innocent VI. His thorough reform of the church government. Cardinal Albornoz restores the papal authority in Italy. In 1362, death of Innocent VI and election of Urban V. In 1367, Urban V returns to Rome, rejoicing of the people. Charles IV pilgrimage to Rome, alliance between the empire and the church. The Pope returns to Avion. In 1370, his death and character is succeeded by Gregory XI. 1375, Florence joins the revolt against the Holy See. The states of the church in insurrection. Consternation of Gregory XI. In 1376, he declares war against Florence. St. Catherine of Siena endeavors to make peace. Sent by the Florentines to negotiate Avion. Tries to bring about the return of the Pope to Rome. Insurrectionary movement in the Eternal City. In 1376, the Pope quits Avion for Rome. 1377, after numerous delays, he arrives there. The Florentines foment fresh troubles in Rome. The Pope fails to suppress them. Wins over to his side the chief general of the Florentines. Florentine proposal of peace rejected by the Pope. Renewed negotiations Congress of Sarzana. In 1378, death of Gregory the 11th, the last of the French popes. Part 2 of Book 1. The Schism and the Great Heretical Movements, 1378 to 1406, in parentheses 1409. Meeting of the conclave, division among the cardinals. The populace demand the election of a Roman. In 1378, April 8th, the cardinals unite and elect Urban VI. They publicly recognize the election as canonical validity. The Pope inspires the highest anticipations. His character and the measure adopted by him. His actions violent and impolitic. I guess that's impolitic. Yeah. St. Catherine of Siena pleads for moderation. The Pope alienates the cardinals and his political friends. The French cardinals openly revolt and quit Rome. 1378, August 9th, they assemble at Agnagne and declared the election invalid. They elect the anti-Pope Clement VII. Commencement of the Great Papal Schism. Conduct of the cardinals inexcusable. St. Catherine of Siena's condemnation of them. Dependence of Clement VII on the French court. He gives away the great part of the states of the church. The support of Clement VII, mainly political. Efforts of the French king in his favor. England espouses the cause of Urban VI. The northern kingdom remains loyal to him. Extreme and imprudent measures of the Pope. In 1381, he excommunicates the Queen of Naples. In 1383, he goes to Naples to assert his authority and besiege. The cardinals determine to seize his person. He discovers their intention and puts them to death. Goodness gracious. 1389, death of Urban VI, deplorable consequence of his reign. Perplexity of the faithful, the whole of Christendom affected by the schism. Reform in ecclesiastical affairs necessary interpreted. The schism prepared the way for the so-called Reformation. The disunity affects even public worship. The unity and concord of Christendom broken. The cause and origin of the church condition. Efforts to remedy the evil of the time. Labors of Gerhard Groot and his community. Thomas à Kempis describes the brothers of the common life. Their work in amelioration of Catholic life in Germany. The growth of sectarian conventicles and false prophecies. The political religious prophecy of Telesporus. The pernicious principles contained in it. The widespread credence given to the prophecies. Grave crisis in the church and the rise of heretical movements. The spread of Waldensian doctrines in Germany and Austria. Subversive principles of the sect of free thought. The appearance of John Wycliffe in England, his teaching. His influence on John Huss, the Bohemian heresiarch. I don't know. It's heresy with like a position, I think. So try that again. Bohemian heresiarch. Like it's arch there at the end. Like heresy with arch, but whatever. No, it's not whatever. You're just finding out that I can't pronounce things. Among my other weaknesses. Political consequences of these doctrine tend to produce anarchy in church and state. In 1389, the Roman cardinals elect a new pope. Boniface IX succeeds Urban VI. Death of Clement VII. Election of anti-pope Benedict XIII. This is 1394. All attempts to heal the schism are frustrated. 1404, death of Boniface IX. And election of Innocent VII. Projects of Innocent VII for the revival of science and arts. 1406, arrested by his death. Adherents of the false Renaissance enter the Pope's service. The humanist becomes the leader of public opinion. The great influence which they exercise. Classical proficiency leads to ecclesiastical preferment. Means suggested to terminate the schism. Decision of the University of Paris on this subject. Part 3. I might just do book. Well, there's book 2. All right. Part 3. The Synods of Pisa and Constance, 1409 and 1417, 1418. In parentheses. Communications between the rival popes. The hopes of union proved delusive. 1407 of Gregory VII's cardinals appealed against him. France and other powers disowned Benedict XIII. Benedict XIII's cardinals joined those who deserted Gregory XII. They convened a council at Pisa. In 1409, the council assembles it once of canonical authority. True doctrine of the primacy of St. Peter. General councils must be convened by the Pope. The primacy of the Pope and the unity of the Church disputed. Erroneous views of the jurisdiction of the Pope and the episcopate. Mistaken views on infallibility. Belief in the divine right of the primacy seriously shaken. Zebrarilla holds that a general council is superior to the Pope. King Rupert's ambassadors at the Council of Pisa. The council condemns and deposes both popes. The election of another anti-pope, Alexander V. Increased confusion. A second schism created. The death of in 1410. The death of Alexander V and election of John the 23rd. Intervention of the king of the Romans. Hope for false doctrines as to the jurisdiction of a general council. Sigismund summons the Council of Constance, its composition. John the 23rd objects. John the 23rd object in his consenting to its convocation, the council's hostile to him. The council's hostility to him. 1415. His proposals of surrender and flight from the council. The council decrees its supremacy over the Pope, its subversion and irregular proceedings. On 1415, May 20th, John the 23rd is tried by the council and deposed. In 1415, July 14th, Gregory XII, in the interest of the church, decides to abdicate. He convenes the council and thereby renders it legitimate. Flight of Benedict XIII, the Holy See declared vacant. 1417, gratitude of the council to Gregory XII, his death, hostile feeling in the council toward the cardinals, conflicting interest and division in the council, its failure due to its composition and mode of procedure, division in regard to reform, and election of a new pope. The bishop of Winchester effects a compromise. 1417, the Great Schism ended by the election of Martin V. Book 2, Part 1, Martin V, 1417 to 1431. Triumph of the Church, general rejoicing. Character Martin V. I never thought about that. Difficulties which confronted him. Cause of the postponement of ecclesiastical reform. The Pope determines to take up his residence in Rome. His meeting with anti-Pope John the 23rd. 1417, March 6. His agreement with Queen Joanna of Naples. The Neapolitan troops evacuate Rome. 1420. Martin V enters Rome. Deplorable conditions of the city. Ruin of its churches and artistic monuments. The Pope devotes himself to the work of restoration. And to the reestablishment of public security. He restores St. Peter and St. John Lateran. Enlists the service of most celebrated painters. Lends encouragement to the art. Labors to promote prosperity and order. Brigandage banished from the states of the church. Their transformation into a united monarchy. Consolidation and growth of the papal power. Submission of various cities to the Pope. Reasons which led him to favor Colonia. His excessive partiality towards them causes jealousy. His zeal against heretics and for the reform of the clergy. He causes the body of St. Monica to be brought to Rome. Contrasts St. Augustine with the heathen philosophers. Promotes devotion to the most holy sacrament. 1424. St. Bernard of Siena visits. Sorry, goodness. 1424, St. Bernard of Siena visits Rome. The marvelous effect of his preaching. St. Francis of Rome and her companions. The Congregation of the Oblates of St. Mary, founded. 1425, the King of France restores the right of the Pope. Abolition of anti-papal legislation in England. Martin V zealously maintains the rights of the Church. 1428, he summons a general council to meet at Pavia. The council proves hostile. He dissolves it. Reform of religious affairs indefinitely postponed. Exaction in Rome under pretext of ecclesiastical fees. International character of the papal court. Immense number of foreigners in the service of the Pope. The Germans greatly favored by the popes. The influence of German nation on the papacy. The intercourse between Rome and foreign nations. Pilgrims to Rome. National foundations for their reception. Origin of the hostelry of Our Lady of Campo Santo. The founders of the Hospice of Santa Maria della Anima. Some other German foundations in the Eternal City. Charitable institutions of other nations in Rome. Erection of a house for Irish priests and a hospice for English pilgrims. Foundation of the national churches connected with the hospice. Rome thus becomes the home of all nations. Inheritance of the Renaissance in the papal service. Effects of the Council of Constance and Basel on the movement. Poggio discovers the MSS copies of the classics. Becomes papal secretary. His ridicule of the clergy. Ribaldry of Poggio and his literary companions. Their very talents caused them to be employed. Composition number of the College of Cardinals. Limit imposed by the Council of Constance. Small number of creation made by Martin V. He issues regulations for the reform of the Sacred College. He issues regulation for the reform of the Sacred College. Displays excessive rigor towards the cardinals, honored by his selection of those created by him. Great learning and austerity of Cardinal Cesarini. His relation to the revival of classical learning. Cardinal Albergatti's connection with the humanists. How Cardinal Corrier disposed of the revenues of his benefices. The influence of such men in the council of the Pope. Cardinal Giordano Orsini promotes literature and art, bequeaths his literary library to the public use. Martin V's effort to restore Catholic unity in Spain. Open hostility displayed by the King of Aragon. King Alfonso's summon to Rome. His submission to the Pope and the end of the schism. Martin V endeavors to expatriate the Bohemian heresy. Failure of the crusade against the Hussites. The King of England and France demand the council. Martin V's dread of the council, defers summoning it. He yields to the pressure, summons the Council of Basel, dies before it assembles, surveys of his character. Part 2. Election of Eugenius IV. Cardinals impose terms. The Pope submits to the curtailment of his authority. Eugenius V's majestic presence and austere habits. The sanctity of his life. Veneration in which he was held. Violence of his measures against the House of Colonna. In 1431, the Council of Basel assembles and is dissolved. It ignores the bull of dissolution, reasserts the council's supremacy of the Pope. 1432, the Pope and his cardinals summon before the council. The extreme action of the council is inexcusable. Consequence if a decree had prevailed. 1433, the Pope recalls the decree dissolving the council. Conspiracy against him, invasion of the Papal States, flight of the Pope. He yields to the demands of the council. In 1434, revolution in Rome, proclamation of a republic. The Pope's palace and the Vatican plundered by the populace. End of the republic. The papal authority restored. Vitalici's relentless action against the rebels. Vitalici? Okay, I guess that's... And against the house of Seville and Colonna, that's right. His military enterprise in Naples and the Papal States. 1440 is entrapped at the bridge of San Angelo and put to death. The circumstances of that event are uncertain. The Cardinal Scarampo appointed to succeed him. Relations of Eugenius IV to the Renaissance. Flavio Biondo's description of the city of Rome. His testimony to the Pope's zeal for restoration. Great number of humanists in the papal service. The Pope declines Valle's services. Relationship between the Christian and the heathen humanists. The Council of Basel, whatever. I said Basil. It's Basli. Basli attacks the church constitution. The Pope appeals to the European powers against it. Negotiation for union with the Greek schismatics. Conflict of Basil. Basil. I don't think it's Basil. Eagle. Basil. Council of Basel attacks the church's constitution. The Pope's appeal to the European powers against it. Negotiations for union with the Greek schismatics. Conflict of Basel as to the meeting place of the Union Council. The Greeks join the papal party and Ferrara is selected. The Basel Synod summoned the Pope to appear before it. July 18th, 1437. He issues a bull suspending its deliberations. Its most distinguished member withdrawal. 1438, the Council of Ferrara, end of the Greek schism. General rejoicing throughout Christendom. Importance of bearing on the Pope's jurisdiction. He is decreed to be the father and teacher of all Christians. Influence on literature of the intercourse with the Greeks. Some distinguished representatives of the Eastern culture. Bessarion as the ecclesiastic and scholar. He brings together the learned men of Greece and Italy. His invaluable collection of classical manuscripts. The Armenian and other churches reconciled to Rome. Untiring efforts of Eugenius IV in the cause of union. The Turks persecute the Christians in the East. The Pope appeals to the Western powers against the infidels. 1443. Response to the appeal, defeat of the Turks. A 10-year truce concluded with them. 1444. The truce is broken. Defeat of Christian army at Varna. 1439. The Council of Basel deposes Eugene IV. Election of Felix V. Reaction produces by the violent measure of the council. Treaty between Alfonso of Aragon and the Pope. 1443. The Pope's 10-year exile ended. His return to Rome. Dilapidated conditions of the Eternal City. Scotland acknowledges the authority of Eugenius IV. Francisco Sforza again makes war on the Papal States. The Pope triumphs over the Council of Basel. Attitude of France and Germany toward the Council. The Diet of Mayence and the pragmatic censure of Bourges. Germany divided between the Pope and the Council. The Pope secures the adhesion of Frederick III. Deposition of the two archbishops. Goodness gracious. The German electors demanded papal recognition of the Basel decrees. In 1446, assembly and composition of the Diet of Frankfurt. Aeneas Civilis procures a reaction favorable to the Pope. His career, he becomes secretary to Cardinal Capranica. His employment and companions of the Synod of Basel. He breaks with the council, enters the service of Frederick III, determines to reform his life, and becomes a priest. His interview with the Pope, begging his forgiveness, breaks up the League of German electors and gains allies for the Pope. Speaks for the German envoys of Eugenius IV. Conditions of agreement between Germany and the Pope. 1447. The cause of the Synod of Basel lost. Death of Eugenius IV. His character. Result of his papacy. Result of his pontificate. His successor defense of the monarchical constitution of the church. His care of the poor, interested in benevolent undertakings. The Vista Graziosa, originating his reign, unjustly censored in regard to the church's reform. Reform to be enduring must be systematic and gradual. Eugenius IV. Steady pursued the reform of the clergy, his relation to art in the Renaissance, his restoration of churches, public buildings, heathenism reflected in the Renaissance art and literature, employment of Fra Angelico in the decoration of the Vatican. Okay. That's what we got. So tomorrow or whenever, I'll read the first chapter.